In case somehow you've missed it, there's been a ton of back and forth online about the price of new games, especially with the remake of The Last of Us on the way at a full $70 price tag. This has led to some backlash, with a number of angry gamers claiming it's just a cash grab without any significant improvements. Developers at Naughty Dog have been combating the runaway narrative with their own takes on Twitter, but things took a turn last week on Thursday, July 20th, when footage of The Last of Us remake leaked. A swarm of angry video game enthusiasts began tweeting video clips allegedly from the leak, saying the animations and gameplay hadn't actually changed at all, and then again started claiming the entire project is just a cash grab, not even worth $30, let alone $70. This erupted into a larger discussion across games Twitter, or I should say reignited a lot of discussions around just $70 games in general. Surprisingly, the following day, Naughty Dog released a 10-minute developer diary explaining the improvements coming to The Last of Us remake, called The Last of Us Part 1 Rebuilt for PS5, Features and Gameplay Trailer. Naughty Dog Vice President Arnie Meyer tweeted, "Leaks really suck, especially when we're right on the cusp of an asset drop. It's disheartening and frustrating to teams who have put their hearts into making awesome things for our fans. That being said, here's a deep dive into what's new for The Last of Us Part 1, including some gameplay." Meyer linked to the video, which features Naughty Dog co-president Neil Druckmann, game director Matthew Gallant, and creative director Sean Eskeg, talking about The Last of Us Part 1's newly enhanced 4K HDR visuals, improved haptics, better frame rate, quick loading, and a lot more. The character models have been upgraded to match Last of Us 2 quality or better. Environments have been overhauled with new art and lighting direction, but also now include way more destructibility and dynamic objects. Enemy AI has significantly improved thanks to the work done on The Last of Us 2, making combat encounters more engaging. According to the video, partner AI has also gotten a tremendous upgrade, and your companions will presumably now actually find and stay in cover when in stealth mode, even as enemies approach. I remember playing the first Last of Us, I think it was like a segment with Bill or something, who was like glitching out on a wall, but the clickers didn't see him. And that makes sense, you don't want to get punished for something that the AI did while you're trying to sneak around, but it's certainly immersion breaking, so hopefully they've come correct on that. I'll believe it when I see it, but hopefully they fixed it here. Apparently, there's also a new internal tool called motion matching, which tries to match frames of animation with frames from real-world performances of mocap actors based dynamically on how a player is moving in the game. That seems really complicated for such a subtle thing, but basically it's supposed to make player movements look smoother and more organic. There will also be an improved photo mode, as well as a permadeath and a speedrun mode. There are unlockable cosmetics, a model viewer, and updated accessibility features, which seem to be going over really well. If you didn't know, The Last of Us 2 had a suite of features that made the game more accessible, including options for hearing, vision, motor functions, input remapping, motion sickness, and more. So all of that is likely coming over, and the new trailer showed off built-in audio descriptions. Of course, being on PlayStation 5, The Last of Us remake is getting 3D audio support and all sorts of neat little uses for the DualSense's haptics and adaptive triggers. So yeah, it really does look like Naughty Dog is kind of putting in the work to make this the definitive version of The Last of Us. But the longing question has been since the beginning is, did they really need to do it so soon? And would the resources spent on remaking The Last of Us 1 be spent better on any of the other multitude of projects Naughty Dog has going on at their studio right now? The general consensus seems to be that since The Last of Us is only 9 years old and received a PS4 remaster in 2014, that's backwards compatible on the PS5, you can still play it easily right now, so the remake isn't really needed. As far as reception goes to the video detailing the upgrades in The Last of Us remake, the video itself does already have 2 million views after just a few days. However, using a plugin, you can see the dislike ratio isn't great. The comments have a number of excited fans looking forward to the game's September release, but also there are a lot of negative comments poking fun at the need for the remake, and overall, both camps do seem to agree that the price is a sticking point. In comparison, the Resident Evil 2 remake came about 20 years after the original Resident Evil 2 was released. Obviously, there were director's cuts and different versions of that game, and obviously a PC version of that game that came out. So it's weird to kind of draw a hard line to say like when it's a good time for a developer to decide to increase the longevity of their IP with a remake. Every game I think is going to be a little bit different, but just for context, yeah, the RE2 remake came out 20 years after. I think a lot of people might have liked to see that remake happen sooner, but you can't complain with what we got. It's an incredible benchmark for what remakes of games could and should be. Detractors of The Last of Us remake have also pointed out it looks like the gameplay mechanics in The Last of Us 2, like going prone and dodging, that players were expecting to reappear in The Last of Us 1 remake, did not make the jump over. Naughty Dog so far has said that they're going to talk more about their decisions behind this later. For me, this kind of makes sense. The original game wasn't designed with those combat mechanics in mind. So, in adding them here could change the way that you approach every single combat encounter in the game. Obviously, you could say the same thing about AI, right? And improving the enemy AI, which they talked about in the video. However, you also kind of have to draw a line somewhere between how much of the original game feel you want to recapture in a remake. Again, the Resident Evil 2 remake did this masterfully. I think it set a really high bar, so it will be interesting to see where Naughty Dog lands with The Last of Us 1 remake. So far, it's a really great looking video game, and maybe it's a little early as far as remakes go, but failing any catastrophic bugs at launch, this seems like it really might be the best way to play The Last of Us. Whether it's worth $70 or not, I might let you guys discuss it in the comments a bit. Obviously, it's going to be up to each individual to decide. It's very subjective. It's up to each person to kind of decide if it's worth it for them, right? And for most of us, we're probably not going to be ready to make that decision until we see more gameplay or more like actual real presentation of gameplay in a way that makes sense for us to kind of say like, oh, okay, I kind of get it. It looks amazing in motion. The performance is there and everything about this is on the level. Whereas if, it pulls like a GTA, which I don't think it's going to, but the GTA trilogy where things are kind of broken and busted and you got that sort of thing going, this is obviously not going to be worth the price point. I think in the gaming space, we tend to really focus on ourselves a lot. In addition, we kind of have an issue where the most angry voices are sometimes the most heard, even if those voices kind of hold the smallest stake in the discussion. If people already don't like The Last of Us and they're saying this is a cash grab, then, they are not really, in the conversation because they weren't going to buy it anyway or whatever, right? That can happen and does happen with online discourse all the time. Obviously, for people who have played The Last of Us before, a remake is a different value proposition than for those who have never played. 8 years ago, there was a whole demographic of developing gamers who were only 10 or 12, who are now 18 and 20 with potentially their own disposable income, or at the very least, they don't need their parents' permission to go out and buy a violent video game. Let's not forget, there's also The Last of Us HBO TV series coming out, so to have a new vector for people to jump into The Last of Us universe with the first game pushing some decent tech on current generation hardware, and then to seamlessly transition visually to the second game, that's kind of a unique prospect and a unique experience that I think is kind of an interesting ramp. I'm not sure how likely that is to happen, but you can imagine a scenario where somebody sees a TV show and they're like, oh, I want to buy a PlayStation now, I want to play The Last of Us. And people who know about games can point to this version and say, this is the one you want to play. And then if you want to see like where the story goes from there, then you can pick up The Last of Us 2. I think, I'm not sure how practical that is, but I could see from Sony's point of view, trying to get people into the ecosystem, that kind of makes a lot of sense. So maybe Sony isn't just looking at The Last of Us Part 1 so much as a remake or the potential to kind of update one of their most popular video games, but as a showpiece and an exclusive to help sell more PS5s and get more people invested in their IP. Not just right now, but moving on into the future as well. For people who are really upset about the price point or, unhappy about the value proposition based on the work shown in The Last of Us remake so far, I would say at least there's a couple of upsides. Obviously, PlayStation is not Nintendo. The Last of Us 1 remake is going to go on sale at some point, or potentially even be included in the new subscription services for PlayStation Plus Extra or PlayStation Plus Premium. If people are subscribing to those, they might be able to get access to the remake that way eventually. You always have the option not to buy a game or not to play a game. The option is always on the table. All right. That's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I know it's a decisive issue, but definitely feel free to share your thoughts in the comments about either the remake or, $70 games in general. We're definitely headed into that future. We've been here for a little while now, but, does it seem justified at this point to you? Let me know. All right. Thanks for watching. And for more video game news and updates, be sure to stay tuned right here to Inside Gaming.